Hey team, I collect lacrosse heads. I'm not the biggest collector in the world, but I come upon them and I want to just document some that are, particularly interesting and make sure that people looking for the history down the road can find it. I've got one today that I think is really cool, pretty unique, and it's just attached to an incredible story. So, I'll get right into it. This is the Warrior Lacrosse 1998 USA Team Limited Edition. So it says U.S. National Lacrosse Team Warrior Limited Edition on the shaft. The head says USA 98. It has the U.S. Lacrosse logo on there. This particular one, strung in traditional, and it looks as though it was never used at all. There's no scratches on the top, and it has this scroll with it that has the team roster on it, and it's the official documentation of the stick. So pretty cool. Another thing that these sticks had, they had this sort of old school butt end, this really sort of sleek one, but not something you want to get poked with. And it's got a serial number. This one is 98, which is 1998, and then 1237, so 1237th stick, I would imagine. Pretty cool stick. Obviously it's in some incredible conditions, never been used, but the history behind it is really cool, and I just want to talk a little bit about that. So the 98 World Games are sort of a famous game. You had the US and Canada rivalry was huge that year, and the championship was crazy game. Some say it's one of the top games ever. I definitely encourage you to go check it out on YouTube. Some folks have uploaded it so you can watch the game, or at least all the major points in the game. The championship was US and Canada. US was killing Canada for most of the game, for like 3/4. It was like 10-1 and then 11-1. Canada gets one, US gets one, it's 12-2. And they end up going into overtime. The US ends up winning in overtime, and back then the overtime wasn't sudden victory. It was, you played out the overtime and the score at the end, determined the winner. But some of the names you had in this game on the Canadian side was Paul and Gary Gate, a young John Grant Jr., Tom Marichek. On the US side, you had Mark Millen, who was sort of the poster boy for US Lacrosse at the time, and for Warrior Lacrosse. David Morrow, the founder of Warrior, was still playing lacrosse, and he was defenseman. He was matched up on Tom Marichek, actually. So he was getting Warrior off the ground right at this time. I mean, Warrior had been founded maybe 6 years before, I think 1992. So it had been around for a while, but he was doing a lot to build the company and the brand. Casey Powell, Tim Sudan, who's now a coach in the PLL. The coach for the US side was Bill Tierney, coach of the Water Dogs currently in the PLL, and was current coach at Princeton at the time, where David Morrow had gone. Brian Volker. You look at the roster, and it's just an incredible roster of legends. That particular time period in lacrosse was amazing, and this stick symbolizes that, which is just really cool. Some other cool things that were happening at that time. Quint Kesnick, who's still announcing lacrosse, was on the field at the time, a younger Quint Kesnick. He was the field reporter. Leif Elsmo was the play-by-play caller for that game. It was held at Johns Hopkins, and one of the other interesting things is that Jake Steifeld and Tim Robertson were in the crowd watching the game, and that's what started MLL, the Major League Lacrosse. So it was them in the crowd, seeing the excitement of the game, just seeing all the crazy stuff that went down, and they decided, there needs to be a professional league, and so that's how the MLL got started, which of course is a big reason why we have the PLL today, and has done so much to spur on the game. So that one championship game and that series of the World Games was a huge factor in determining really the future of lacrosse. So this stick is representative of that, which I just think is really cool. There's just so much history in this limited edition. It's a pretty cool find, and I wanted to share it with everyone so that if if you have an interest in it or you come across one of these, you know, there's more history in this set. A lot of the heads you'll find aren't in this good shape. People use them and they've been kicking around, but if it's got this USA 98 on the side, that's a really special part of history. There were a couple of things that I just wanted to read. USA Lacrosse has a great write-up on this game. It's sort of like a bunch of interviews from all the players kind of in a conversation, sort of chronicling the championship game. So definitely recommend that. But here's a couple excerpts from that are interesting. So this is from David Morrow, who is, again, U.S. defenseman, founder of Warrior. And he says, so for me, this game was even more stressful because I've been trying to play and prepare the World Games while traveling back and forth to Asia to get equipment made for the sponsorship they have with U.S. Lacrosse. So Warrior was the sponsor of U.S. Lacrosse for the World Games. And so this was like a really big time for him. He'd started Warrior 5 years earlier, and this was the biggest investment we had made at the time, $250,000. And we hadn't made a full line of equipment before. I didn't even have the money to pay for it, so I got the money by getting credit cards, like from the offers you would get in the mail, and paid U.S. Lacrosse that way. So here I am in personal debt, facing financial ruin, preparing for a world championship, and had just gotten married. I was on the road for 26 straight weeks before that game. Then at the start of overtime, our manager, the late Nolan Rogers, says to me, "You won't be able to sell me your equipment if we lose this game." Are you kidding me? I couldn't believe that he said that. So just crazy to think about what these players were doing at the time, creating the modern lacrosse industry while playing in these games, representing their countries. And David Morrow, obviously, you know, the guy who is responsible for this existing, was a key part of all that. The eventual partner, Jake Steinfeld, who some of you may remember, Body by Jake, had played lacrosse in college. He was like into bodybuilding and all this stuff, but he's in the stands with Tom Robertson, and he had this to say, or Tim. Me and Tim were sitting at the wall, front row, and the place was packed. A guy sitting next to us had a batting helmet on with beer cans on either side. There were a lot of people having a lot of fun, young and old, male and female. Kids had their sticks, like when you went to a baseball game and you brought your mitt. I hadn't seen a lacrosse game since the last time I was on the field in November 1977, scrimmaging Syracuse, when I was a face-off guy at Cortland. Then I went to LA and got into bodybuilding. This was overtime, the US versus Canada. The place was going nuts. It was because of that night we met with Dave at 7:30 the next morning and went forward with what is today Major League Lacrosse. So another fun story at the time is that at the time, Mark Millen, father of McCabe and Brendan Millen, who are now playing at the University of Virginia and they're some of the most incredible lacrosse players ever, he and Tom Marichek from the Canadian side were roommates in Baltimore. So a lot of the players were like staying at the Hopkins dorms for this. They obviously Australia, UK, whatever, but you know, some of the players had homes in the area. Mark and Tom were living together, and so David Morrow was like crashing on their couch. Towards the end of the game, Tom Marichek gets a goal to almost bring Canada, I think, within one. I think their 14th goal was 14-15, and he beat David Morrow to do that. And so they had this like personal rivalry, but they're all friends. And then after the game, they all went back to Mark and Tom's house in Baltimore and had a huge party, both the US and Canadian guys, and they were all just like, what just happened? But it was them and their families, and it's one of the things I love about the lacrosse community is that you have this super high level of competition where people want to just excel and play their best, and they might even get, you know, chippy on the field, but we all love lacrosse, and so the moment the game's over, you know, you're best friends again. So anyway, USA 98 limited edition Warrior stick with the like commemorative documentation and everything. So a pretty special thing, and I wanted to share it with all of you.